The rabbis were in Medina, and the Quraysh sent a delegation to find out from them, how can we tell whether this man, Nabi Muhammad ﷺ, is indeed a prophet? The rabbis had asked him 3 questions, which only a prophet can answer. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending the answers to the 3 questions. One of the questions was, ask him about the great traveler. Ask him about the great traveler who traveled to the 2 ends of the world. So with question 1, ask him about the great traveler who traveled to the 2 ends of the earth. And we are told that this traveler is called Zulqarnain, the one who possesses 2 qarns. And qarn can mean a horn, so qarnain will be 2 horns. And qarn could also be an age or an epoch, a time. So qarnain will be 2 ages. So this is a man who is either of 2 horns or impacts upon 2 ages. قُلْ سَأَتْلُو عَلَيْكُم مِّنْهُ ذِكْرًا. I am going to tell you something about him which must be remembered. إِنَّا مَكَّنَّا لَهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ سَبَبًا. Behold, we established him on earth securely, with the power and with the means, with the capacity and the knowledge and the right means to achieve anything that he might set out to achieve. And so surely a superpower, not an ordinary power, a superpower. فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا. And so he chose the right means now to do what he wanted to do. حتى إذا بلغ مغرب الشمس. He sets out on a journey to the west. And he reaches a place where the sun is setting. And there he found it setting in a body of water that was hamiyah, dark, murky, so visibility in that water will be very shallow. And there he came across a people. Is it possible for us to identify that body of water? If we can, we'll be on the way to locating the geographical location of the area in which we're talking about. We're going to do that in a moment, inshallah. Then Zulqarnain set off on the 2nd journey now, and he's going to the rising of the sun. And when he had traveled to the distance that he could travel, the Quran does not tell us how far it was, he came upon a people, لَمْ نَجْعَلْ مِن دُونِهَا سِتْرًا, a people, لَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُمْ مِن دُونِهَا سِتْرًا. We have not provided for them as a covering other than this covering. It appears to us that it is the natural covering that you have from the sunshine. So a people living a primitive way of life. And he left them as they were. And then he went on to the 3rd journey, which is verse number 92. And so now he travels in the 3rd direction. إِذَا بَلَغَ بَيْنَ السَّدَّيْنِ. He comes to a place between a pass between 2 mountain ranges. On this side are mountains, on this side are mountains. And in between there is a pass. Can we locate Geographically, where are we talking about? Is it possible? A pass between two mountain ranges. And there he came across a people, لا يكادون يفقهون قولا. He came across a people whose language he could not understand, because their language was unique. Their language had no connections with other language in that region. It was a language which was not connected with all the other languages in that region. When they had learned to communicate with each other, then these people spoke to Zulkarnain and said to him, Ya Zulkarnain, O Zulkarnain, Inna Ya'juja wa Ma'juja mufsiduna fil ard. Gog and Magog are committing acts of fasad in our territory. So Gog and Magog have PhDs in fasad. O Zulkarnain, can you help us? You have the power. Can you build a barrier to protect us from these people? He should have said, I don't need to build any barrier. I'll move in there and I'll beat them up, and they won't touch you anymore. So I don't need to build any barrier. I'll go and teach them a lesson they'll never forget. But no, he didn't say that. They said, we're prepared to pay you. He said, I don't need your money. What Allah has given to me is more valuable. So he agreed to build the barrier. What I need from you is your labor. Help me with your manpower. And I'm going to build a barrier between you. Now number 96, verse number 96. Bring me blocks of iron. And so that has to be a geographical location where there's iron ore. It has to be a geographical location where there are mountain ranges and a pass between the mountain ranges. It has to be a geographical location where on the left you have a body of water which is so dark and murky that visibility is very shallow. Okay? And it has to be an area where there are large deposits of iron ore. Bring me blocks of iron. And after he had covered the pass with blocks of iron, he said, build a furnace, blow with your bellows, and now bring me molten copper. So he poured the molten copper, and the engineers, we have an engineer here, tells me that this is to prevent rust. And after he had built the barrier and covered it, the Quran speaks, it changes from the word saddain to use another word, sadafain. In verse number 95, آتوني زبر الحديد حتى إذا ساوى بين الصدفين. Previously the word used was saddain, but now the word used is sadafain. Saddain is two barriers, two mountain ranges, but sadafain is something else. It is like the two sides of a shell. We're going to have some pictures like this now. The two sides of a shell. You've been to the seashore. When you open a shell like this, it will join at the bottom, but open at the top. That's the shape of the pass between the mountains. Join at the bottom, open at the top. So when he had blocked off this space, this sadafain, now the molten copper is put on it, and then Gog and Magog could neither scale the barrier nor could they penetrate it, so they are now trapped behind the barrier. And so Zulkarnain now says, هَذَا رَحْمَةُ مِن رَبِّي. This barrier is constructed in consequence of Allah's kindness and grace. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي. But when that time comes of which my word has warned, إِذَا فُتِحَتْ They will not return to reclaim the town as their own until إِذَا فُتِحَتْ, until Gog and Magog are released. When that time comes for Gog and Magog to be released, so that Banu Israel are to be brought back to the Holy Land, جِئْنَا بِكُمْ لَفِيفًا, brought back as a motley crowd. At that time, جَعَلَهُ دَكَّا, Allah is going to bring down this barrier and it become dust. Now let's turn to the pictures and see whether we can locate. This is the Caucasus Mountains here, the white being the snow. And on the left side there is a body of water which is so dark and so murky, with so much algae in it, that it has been given a name. And that name has been there with it for many, many, many years. Even the time of Ibn Kathir. It's called the Black Sea. It's called the Black Sea. Why? Because it is so dark. If you go to the Mediterranean Sea and you're on a ship, you could see several meters underneath the water. But if you go to the Black Sea, you'd hardly be able to see more than 1 meter underneath the water. On this side of the Black Sea is the Caspian Sea. And in between the Caspian and the Black Sea is this body of land. So we say that Zulkarnain is traveling in that direction to the west, and then in this direction to the east. The Caucasus Mountains are an unbroken range of mountains from that end to this end. But in between the Caucasus Mountains, there is one pass, only one, in between. It's called the Dari Gorge. Let's see if we have, here we are. There is the gorge, and there's one side, and there's the other side. And it's like an open shell. See, the Quran is describing this Sadafain. So we have, I believe, established for you the geographical location of Gog and Magog. The people who are located behind the barrier. Behind the barrier, on that side of the Caucasus, were the Khaza. On that side of the Caucasus were the Khaza, a tribe of people who converted and became Jews. Must have been on a Sunday morning. And some of them converted from Judaism and became Christians. Must have been on a Sunday evening. So you have Khaza who are Jews, and you have Khaza who are Christians. But they did not become Jews because of religious conviction. They became Jews as a matter of political convenience. So they don't particularly care for Torah and for the laws of diet and so on. So these are people who are Jews as a nation, but not as a religion. A nation, not a religion. These are the people who today control power in the world. Who are Gog and Magog? They are human beings. They are not some strange creature living in the interior of the earth. That's Disneyland thinking. They're human beings. The barrier built by Zulkarnain was destroyed by Allah in the lifetime of Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. If you don't want to believe this that I have said, fine, you can accept that the barrier is still there. We don't have to be divided and be fighting with each other over it. No. I say the barrier is gone, it's destroyed. You say the barrier is still there. So why do we have to be fighting and dividing ourselves with each other over this? All I'm saying is, if the barrier is still standing, why aren't you searching for it? I think there's a question of credentials here. If a barrier built by Zulkarnain mentioned in the Quran, a geographical reality mentioned in the Quran, is still standing on the face of the earth, not buried beneath the surface of the earth, what kind of Disneyland thinking is that? If it is there standing on the face of the earth, why are you not searching for it? Why has no human being seen and recognized that barrier in 1400 years? And more since the Quran was revealed. Why? My answer is because it's already been destroyed. But you don't accept that answer. You say Imran Hosein is misguided. Don't listen to Imran Hosein, fine. That's shameful. Scholars don't behave like that. If Gog and Magog have been released, then we can understand the fasad in the world today, universal fasad. Inna Ya'juj wa Ma'juj mufsiduna fil ard. If they are released in the world, they are the agents of fasad. They're the ones who have brought the Jews back to the Holy Land to reclaim it as their own. Then it's very easy for us to recognize who they are. To Gog and Magog, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, which are major signs of Akhirul Zaman. And yet, our critics are emphatic that no, Dajjal has not been released. Gog and Magog have not been released. If we can't find a barrier built by Zulkarnain, which is made of iron and steel, it's probably somewhere down a few miles underneath the earth. Is that scholarship? We do not want to disrespect our critics. But we say, if you are not prepared to accept that Dajjal is the mastermind of the modern age, and that Gog and Magog are the means through which Dajjal pursues his mission on the earth, then we're very sorry, we're moving on. We can't wait on you. Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam was asleep at the home of his wife Zainab radiallahu ta'ala anha. And he woke up from his sleep, when the hadith is located in Sahih Bukhari, in several different versions from several different sources, companions. So we say it is mutawatir. He woke up from his sleep. What he had seen in his sleep, also a vision like Ibrahim alayhi salam, was so terrible, that his face was red, flushed red. It has to be something terrible for the Prophet of Allah to wake up with his face all red, flushed red. What did he see? He woke up and he spoke these memorable lines. He said, وَيْلٌ لِلْعَرَبِ مِنْ شَرٍ قَدْ اقْتَرَبَ. Woe unto the Arabs because of an evil, shar, an evil. It can't be an ordinary evil for his face to be so flush red. It has to be a very great evil, which is now close. And then he raised his hands like this and he said, today. Today means this day or 1,000 years from now. Where has reason fled? He said, today. A hole has been made in the radam. He didn't use the word sad, he used the word radam. Surah Al-Kahf has both the words. When they ask Zulkarnain to build it, they use the word sad. When he built it, he used the word radam. And the hadith says the radam of Zulkarnain, of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Today a hole has been made, indicating that the great evil which is going to devastate the Arabs has not as yet occurred. It is an end time event because the words Gog and Magog are there. What is this great catastrophe that is coming on the Arabs? What is this great destruction that is coming on the Arabs which has not as yet come? Where is Islamic scholarship today? Why are you not asking these questions? And I'm not asking the Malay ulama. I'm not asking the Indonesian ulama. I'm asking the Arab ulama. She asked, who? Zainab radiallahu ta'ala anha. Anuhlika, will we be destroyed? Anuhlika, halaka, to destroy. Will we be destroyed? This is the word she asked. Will we, the Arabs, be destroyed when there are righteous people amongst us? The hadith is in Sahih Bukhari. He said, Na'am, yes. And then he went on to use words I never understood until recently, until I saw the pathetic state of Islamic scholarship today, and the even pathetic state of those who lead Muslims today. He said, إِذَا كَثُرَ الْخَبَثِ, when the scum prevails, then it will come. And today, the scum prevails. They have eyes and yet they cannot see. They have ears and yet they cannot hear. They have hearts and yet they do not understand. أُولَٰئِكَ كَالْأَنْعَامِ بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ. They're worse than cattle. They're the scum. And when the scum prevails, then the destruction of the Arabs, not the Malay, not the Turks, the Arabs will take place. But I want to take you now back to that spot in the Caucasus Mountains, because we want to fine-tune our attempt to identify Gog and Magog. It is not sufficient to say that Gog and Magog are the European Christians and European Jews. No, because amongst the European Christians and European Jews, there will be those who become Muslims, there will be those who are our friends and allies. Do not make the mistake. We have to look for a people who will eventually be moving from that northern area and moving towards Jerusalem. Shortly after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, something very mysterious happened in that part of the world that historians have chosen to bury. A tribe called the Khaza chose to embrace Judaism. And so the world witnessed for the first time the very strange phenomenon of a non-Semitic people becoming Jews. Non-Semitic becoming Jews. And these people, the Khaza, chose to convert to Judaism, but they did so not for any religious reasons. They were not so much interested in the kitab and to follow the law. They embraced Judaism for purposes of political expediency. They were sandwiched between Islam and Christianity, Byzantine Christianity, and they chose Judaism. These European Jews who have no racial, biological connection with the Banu Israel multiplied. وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. Nasl, they multiplied and breeded to such an extent that today 9 in every 10 Jews in the world, 90% or more, are European Jews. They outnumber the Semitic Jews by 9 to 1 or 10 to 1. These European Jews, if you look at the list of names of Nobel Prizes for science, for literature, would you name it, you will find that these are people who far exceed the rest of mankind in their intellectual brilliance, in their academic achievements, in their scientific research. They are a people different from the rest of mankind. And now we come to the one hadith that has created a problem for the world of Islamic scholarship. The hadith is in Sahih Muslim. It speaks of the return of Nabi Isa alayhi salam. And then he kills Dajjal. And then after he has killed Dajjal, فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ. Ba'atha does not mean release. Ba'atha means to send. But somehow or the other, everybody have come to the conclusion that after Nabi Isa alayhi salam kills Dajjal, that Allah will now release Ba'atha, Gog and Magog. The first of them will pass by the Sea of Galilee, but in Arabic it's not the Sea of Galilee. That's an English word used by the Christians. The Jews don't use Sea of Galilee. The Jews call it Lake Kinneret. Kinneret. And in the Ahadith it is known as Buhayrat al-Tabariya, Lake Tiberias. All three names refer to the same body of water. The first of them will pass by the Sea of Galilee and start to drink the water. And by the time the last of them pass, they will say, there used to be water here. I think this is a fairly simple footprint to recognize. Fairly simple, like the tall buildings. That when you see the water level in the Sea of Galilee going down and down and down, and when it reaches the point of no return, that it has crossed the level now, that the Sea of Galilee could ever be revived. It's only a matter of time for it to die, to dry up. Then you know that you are close now to the end. What is the water level in the Sea of Galilee now? The answer is the water level in the Sea of Galilee has already crossed the point of no return. That's how low it is. Indicating that Gog and Magog have been passing. When they pass by the Sea of Galilee, where are they going? They're going to Jerusalem. When they go to Jerusalem, what are you doing with the water? You drank all that water? Huh? We're dealing here with religious symbolism. It's not the actual drinking of the water. Rather, it is the consumption of water. Israel said, we're going to make the deserts green. Those Arabs couldn't do that. They are dum-dums, the Arabs. And we have the scientific and technological know-how. We can change the desert and make it green. So when you see the water level in the Sea of Galilee going down lower and lower and lower and lower, you know that a lot of them have already passed. And by the time the Sea of Galilee dries up and there is no more water, they have all left the north and they have reached to the Holy Land. Where are we now? Answer? Just look at the Sea of Galilee and you know. A little island just appeared in the Sea of Galilee maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, which was not there before. The Sea of Galilee is going down. It is in irreversible decline. It's just a matter of time now before it dries up. Indicating that most of Gog and Magog have already come this way.
Thousands of years ago, Moses had to strike a rock to get water in the desert. Well, today Israelis are taking a slightly different approach, using technology and creativity. In Israel, the main sources of drinking water are the Sea of Galilee and 2 underground aquifers. In 1953, Israel started building the national water carrier, a system of pipelines, canals, and reservoirs that carry water from the Sea of Galilee to the rest of Israel.
For centuries, the Sea of Galilee has inspired believers the world over. The waters the Bible tells us Jesus walked on, the shores where he performed his miracles. A place of beauty, religion and legend. But today, on the brink of disaster.
Water should be above our heads, in fact. The tragedy is that you don't need to be Jesus Christ anymore to walk here on the Sea of Galilee.
Environmentalist Guidon Bromberg and I could walk the floor of the lake because its waters have retreated hundreds of yards.
Making the desert bloom is unsustainable, and the demise of the Sea of Galilee must send that message to Israeli politicians.
This bay should be full of water right up to those rocks. The Sea of Galilee is so low it must be pumped uphill into the Jordan now, the river it should feed. Otherwise its baptism sites would dry up. But the Jordan doesn't flow much further from here. Israeli authorities deny mismanagement. Instead, they blame the weather.
Such a drought of 5 successive years, that's something we never met. And that's also something that statistically is really rare.
On the waters, boatmen who fish for tourists are deeply alarmed.
We used to use the first pier, and then the water level went down, so we brought another one, and now another one.
Do you think it's going to get better?
We pray it will be better, and it will be. We trust God.
It'll need more than divine intervention. Scientists say if the Sea of Galilee sinks another metre or two, it could reach a point of no return, and this could be lost forever.
The Sea of Galilee is dropping so fast that islands of earth are appearing. It could run out of water altogether in less than a year, and this is 1/3 of Israel's water supply. The Jordan River is drying up, barely a muddy stream in places. The farms along its banks dying without water.
As the dry months of summer sweep through the Middle East, Israel is faced with its worst water crisis ever. The water level in Israel's 3 main water sources, the Sea of Galilee, the coastal aquifer, and the mountain aquifer, have now receded to the lowest levels in recorded history. In fact, the 3 sources have already dropped below the red line, the point at which Israel is supposed to stop pumping. Faced with increased consumption due to population growth, land development, and water commitments to Jordan and the Palestinians, Israel has no choice but to continue pumping from its water sources. Yet if Israel continues, water levels will soon drop under the black line, the point of no return, where continued pumping will cause severe, irreversible damage to Israel's water sources.
Israel lies in the arid Middle East region. Population growth and dry winters have led to dangerous decline in the country's 2 main water sources. Lake Kinneret in North Israel is shrinking, while the underground water reserves are overused and partially contaminated.
The biblical River Jordan, a rare freshwater resource in the Middle East. It forms the border between Israel and the West Bank and Jordan. At this bend, about 6 miles from Jericho, it's believed John the Baptist baptized Jesus of Nazareth.
In the 60s, the water level of the Jordan River was actually where we're standing now. In wintertime, it was this high.
Gidon Bromberg is Israel Director of EcoPeace Middle East, an environmental group.
Badran Jabba surveys his destroyed crops. A field of cauliflowers and tomatoes, ruined. And it's not the result of a natural disaster. What happened here was man-made. Badran Jabba's fields lie right beneath the illegal Jewish settlement of Kiryat Arba. There doesn't appear to be any restrictions on water use here. A row of greenhouses where the settlers are growing crops. This is the Israeli water mains for the whole region. State-of-the-art and well-maintained. Across the road is the local connection for the Palestinians of Al-Baqa village, rusty and with a smashed gauge. Only one house in the village has a water supply. It belongs to a cousin, and Badran has connected a pipe to it.
The taps in Hamid Muhammi's home are there more as a sign of hope. There's been no water through them for 5 long months.
The municipality does not give us water as they should. Water comes through our pipes twice a year.
More than 300,000 Palestinians across the West Bank are not connected to a water network, according to Palestinian human rights groups. Since the 1967 occupation, all water resources are exclusively in Israeli hands.
We receive maybe 2,000 cubic meters per day. It means that we need 7,000 to give the people to reach 70 to 80 liters per capita.
Once you leave the West Bank and cross into Israel, the picture could hardly be more different. There's no shortage of water here. Israelis quite literally splash it around. And you'll hardly find a more striking example than this of how Israel squanders water. An ornamental fountain in a park, while Palestinians in the West Bank barely have enough water to drink and to wash. Amnesty says the settlers use 5 times as much water as the Palestinians in the West Bank. Back in the West Bank, the settlement of Har Sinai is expanding across the fence from Radi Sultan's fields. There's no shortage of water here.
Today, Palestinians have access to roughly 90 liters of water per day per capita, while Israelis have access to 284. Palestinians say this disbalance results from the Israeli Water Corporation often cutting off their water supply and Israel denying them permits to dig wells. They say that Mekorot maintains a strict quota on their water usage while pumping unlimited amounts both for Israelis and for Jewish settlers in the West Bank.
This is the most significant source of
surface fresh water that we have. For this region, when we're talking about Israel, Palestine, and Jordan, this is it. Israel pumps water out of this lake into what is called the national water carrier, bringing water from this part of the country, the northern area where we have most of the rainfall, to the very dry south.
Munther, a water engineer, talked to us in Wadi Fukin, a Palestinian village surrounded by Israeli settlements.
Water to us Palestinians, it's pumped by Israel, by the government of Israel. And the government of Israel is giving us less than 1/5 of what he's giving to his population.
Cut off from the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River, the Palestinians' only freshwater sources are groundwater and what they buy from Israel. Israelis use 3 to 4 times as much water as Palestinians, while Americans use 8 times as much. Across the border in Jordan, people share the same watershed and the same scarcity.
This place was in this, what we see in this picture. This is the situation of this place in 70s and 60s and 50s and the last century. It's disaster.
A leading rights group claims Israel is depriving Palestinians of their fair share of the region's scarce water supplies, while settlers and other Israeli citizens splash it around. With the tap all but closed for residents of the West Bank and Gaza Strip.
Some areas in the West Bank have had no water for the past 40 days, while the Israeli water company Mekrot has diverted their share to illegal Israeli settlements. Israel has announced that it has turned off taps to the Palestinian communities in the occupied West Bank, effectively leaving tens of thousands of Palestinians without any water supplies. Currently, water lines are empty in Jenin, several villages in Nablus, in addition to the city of Salfit and its surrounding villages.
Israel has complete control over the region's water resources. It prevents Palestinians from digging wells and other methods to invest underwater sources. Palestinians are only allowed to dig wells with a specific depth in specific areas. They control everything regarding water.
According to Amnesty International, nearly 200,000 Palestinians in the West Bank do not have access to running water.
Gaza, which lies between the arms of the Mediterranean, is now a crisis water area. Most of the families in the Gaza Strip do not have access to water, both drinking and running. However, the people would now dig in the ground for any water if it works for them.
We have nothing. We are sitting in the school. We have no water, no food. There are a lot of casualties in the school. We even don't shower.
Now, Israel's national water company has cut off supplies to tens of thousands of Palestinians living in the occupied West Bank. Mekrot has decided to close the valves which supply major areas of the northern West Bank. The city of Salfit and surrounding villages, including Jenin, have been affected.
البير تبع المي ميته سيئة جدا. ميته عاقله لا حتى الحيوان لا يقبل انه يشرب.
And we find in Surah Al-Anbiya only one more reference to Gog and Magog, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about a town. Remember the town? And he had destroyed the town, punished it by destroying it, and then expelled the people of the town. وَحَرَامٌ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا. And then he banned the people of the town, that they could never return to reclaim that town as their own. أَنَّهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ. They are in a state of permanent exclusion, banned from returning to that town. حتى until when? حتى إذا فتحت يأجوج ومأجوج, until Gog and Magog are released. وهم من كل حدب ينسلون. وهم من كل حدب ينسلون. And Gog and Magog, when they are released, they spread out in every direction, which is one meaning. And if you spread out in every direction, then you'll take control of the world. The land, the sea, the air. Read Toynbee. Read Arnold Toynbee. Read a book called Civilization on Trial. I'm giving you good books to read, incidentally, not comic books. Read Arnold Toynbee, the British historian. Read a book entitled Civilization on Trial. You should get it on the internet. It was written somewhere around 80 years, 90 years ago, 1935, somewhere around 70, 80 years ago. And in that book, Arnold Toynbee points out that modern Western civilization has risen upon the world with a mission to take control of the whole world. And he says, the land, the sea, the air, everything. He said it in that book. وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. They spread out in all directions, and with the indestructible power they take control of the world. For the first time in history, one people will control the whole world. Nobody ever did that before. The other meaning is that they descend from every height. So they target you and they impose themselves upon you. You can't get away from them. Which town is it? Which town is it that is linked with Gog and Magog, which is the biggest footprint of all? Which town? We used this methodology, that we looked at all the ahadith of Prophet Muhammad pertaining to Gog and Magog, to see whether there was any town mentioned by him that is linked to Gog and Magog. And when we had studied all the ahadith, we found only one town, only one in the hadith. And it is Baytul Maqdis, Jerusalem, Al-Quds. And so we said, well, here is a hypothesis which is already resting on fairly firm foundations, since this is the town mentioned in the hadith that is connected with Gog and Magog. So let's look and try on the shoe and see whether it fits. Why can't we do that? So then we looked at Jerusalem, and we found that this is a town which was destroyed by Allah, and Banu Israel were expelled from the town, even though Allah had given the land to them. And so we recognize the town to be Jerusalem. And we ask the question, who are those who liberated Jerusalem and brought Banu Israel back to Jerusalem? If you can recognize who they are, you have recognized Gog and Magog. But Iqbal it was who said, and I now have to quote him again in Urdu, and they can't take it away from him. You can't do it. It's there. खुल गए याजूज और माजूज के लश्कर तमाम. Some of you will say, oh, we heard this before, you know. Oh, we never thought about it. खुल गए याजूज और माजूज के लश्कर तमाम. All the forces of Gog and Magog have now been released. It's not just that they have been released from behind the barrier built by Zulkarnain in Surah Al-Kahf of the Quran. More than that. They've all been released and they've all spread out over the world. Kul gaye Ya'juj or Ma'juj ke lashkar tamam. All. So this is the world order of Gog and Magog. That is what Iqbal is saying. Chashme Muslim dekhle tafsir harfi yansilu. Now Muslims, you better turn your eyes, direct your attention to the word yansilun. Direct your attention to the word yansilun. Only one scholar in the whole world of Islam, only one, not only recognized it, but proclaimed it. What is this word yansilun? He's referring to the Quran. That's what he's doing. وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. And after being released, they spread out in all directions, taking control of the world in the world order of Gog and Magog. Iqbal recognized it. Iqbal understood that Gog and Magog were released. Iqbal understood that we have lost the Khilafah because of Gog and Magog. And Iqbal knew that the Khilafah cannot be restored so long as Gog and Magog control the world. He knew it. And he said it. But I want to take you now back to that spot in the Caucasus Mountains, because we want to fine-tune our attempt to identify Gog and Magog.